so rather than coming to every district, what we're trying to do on this network is provide a platform where everyone who's using our product could come on and brainstorm together, and we could give you a little bit further advice. So Brad, in the future, you can kind of test it out, but it's something if you want to send building principals or give them the recording of it, because we're really trying to go deeper in, okay, you have our products, so here's some topics and some processes we would really encourage. And then the hardest thing with administrators is getting people on during the day. As you see, more people RSVP and they can't always get on here. But then the second goal would be, as we can get more people on, just to give you collaboration time with, well, how are you using it? Are you doing something differently? Because everybody has their own spin on it. And as a former, Val, Sue, and I have all been principals, and it can be a very lonely job. And DeFore talks a lot about the power of collaboration. Well, we believe principals should be collaborating as well as teachers. So that's why we're trying to provide it. So I'm going to dive in. Our collaboration is going to be, some people on the team, but hopefully it'll still be helpful. And Cynthia, for you who's considering the product, this call is more geared for if you're using some of the things, how we would be coaching to use it. So it'll be a nice little peek into that.
Okay.
So this is just an overview of our company and just a reminder of what we're trying to do with the tools that you do have. We're really trying to combat against teachers leaving the field. We really want to recruit and retain good teachers. And so we're trying to get good systems and Missouri-based products in place. Competency-based learning, which if you go down with personalized learning, those are kind of used synonymously. And it is our assumption from things we're seeing at the state that that's really the direction our state is going. And so all of the work that we're equipping you with what our goal is that when that does come down the line, your teachers aren't scrambling and redoing things. We've now given you everything you need to do that. It's MSIP 6 compliance because we're helping you hit all those performance indicators by focusing on the priorities and what kids will be tested over. It's always aligned to our standards. And then we always try to help teachers with that big gap in learning loss that we're dealing with COVID. So, and we like to pride ourselves that it's created by Missouri educators for Missouri educators. We're really trying to help teachers in the field. Most of you know me. I introduced you for yourselves. I know you on the call, but how about we do this third bullet here? Coming into the call today, you might have just been coming to scope it out, but do either of you have like a burning question or something that you really wanted to talk about or learn about today?
I do not. I'm just scoping you out, scoping out the product and you and how it would fit within our district.
Got it. What about you, Brad?
I don't have a burning question either. I will say I haven't met Sue, worked with Shauna and Valerie quite a bit over the last year. I did go in this morning and I watched the teacher evaluation video and teacher improvement plan little 20-minute thing, and I thought that was awesome. Something we're an NEE school, but something we can definitely incorporate into the teacher growth process. And so I went ahead and forwarded that on my principals, and we're going to kind of sit down and talk about appropriate timeline for implementing some of those things. So appreciate you sharing that. Cynthia, just a little bit about us. We're a small district outside of Kansas City. I'm a second-year superintendent. When I came in, we had we didn't have any systematic process for curriculum. And so we've been working with the group for, really dove in last spring, and they've really helped us with standardizing our curriculum process, vetting everything against the Missouri Learning Standards, specifically the priority standards, and we're getting ready to dive into the assessment piece. So it's been really good so far. I like the product. It's very simple, and it tries to make it as easy as possible. I know curriculum can be painful work at times, but also necessary, and the tool helps us with that. So
thank you, Brad. Well, and I'm so glad. So Sue, great job. She has been killing those videos. And what we're really trying to do with the network, Brad, which is really the next piece now that you've gotten all the product, is we're trying to offer a lot of great PD. On that network fee, it covers the updates to all your digital product, but it also covers a membership to this. So we're really trying to bolster up the professional learning and PD. We're going to be putting more things on here that administrators could be sharing with teachers, if that makes sense. Because now that you have the product, this is our way of, rather than you having to pay us to come out, we want to create this hub of great PD for your people that you could always have access to, because that's where the rubber hits the road. I think in education, we have a lot of great products, but we don't always know how to utilize them the best. And that's my biggest fear now is, okay, you got this great thing. And even with this educator evaluation, these MAT tools are huge in that, right? That they could go into a classroom, they should be looking up the scope and sequence. So that's kind of what we're going into today. I think it could kind of piggyback off of Sue's administrator or teacher evaluation call. What we really want to talk about today is when we talk the insured viable curriculum. So our clients, so Brad, who has this, and Cindy, you're looking into it. With our curriculum management tool, we're trying to create a guaranteed viable curriculum, right? That's Marzano's terms of, do you know your standards? That's what the guarantee is, that we're teaching the standards, specifically the priority and supporting for educators. And now that you have this system in place, we want to get more into this little bullet of what are the processes we're using to support them? Because teachers have created it, but the next step for administrators are, do we know how to use it? Are we making sure teachers are using it? Because it could create this nice, pretty thing, but is it really usable? If that makes sense. Sometimes a common norm in our field is we'll create something because we checked it off the list for our administrator. And then we don't use it, and it's not really indicative of what's happening in the classroom. So that's what today's call is really going to focus on, is give you ideas of how are we setting some processes in place to make sure that teachers are really using that. And I'm going to talk about building leadership moves of accountability, right? Sadly, what gets monitored gets done, not to go all admin, but that's really the way that it is. And so part of this call is, if you have the management tool, okay, as a principal, what processes can we do that don't seem like we're big brother or heavy, but that we really are making sure teachers are using it? And then we just wanted to give time to collab. So what do we believe people need? This first one, leaders with vision and administrator PLCs. That's the purpose of today's call. We feel like leaders need collaboration and a vision for where they're going. We believe they need that roadmap. And that's what we've tried to do with our curriculum management tool. It's that roadmap of what are your standards and how are you going to teach them throughout the year. And then we believe they need Missouri specific tools. And that's where Val is going to be diving in with your district, Brad, of those Missouri proficiency scales. What do our standards really mean? You can use that resource, but let's vet it. Does it have the same idea of proficiency that our standards do? Because the biggest gap I saw as a state consultant, that teachers were working so hard, then they would give me their assessment and their understanding of that standard was wrong. So I like to liken it to an analogy of, if I was preparing for a 5K race and for speed, and I show up on race day and they say, no, it's a 10K. I'm not going to do well because I trained wrong. And I think that's exactly what's happening. People are training for a 5K and they get to the MAP or EOC and it's a different standard. And so we're really trying to have crystal clarity with those MAT tools of, no, here's what you're really preparing people for, because I think half the problem has been the target hasn't been clear. So that's teachers are working too hard and they're getting the fall. Well, Missouri should be giving us what we're creating, right? Hi, welcome. Here's your standards and what they mean. But since they're not, our company is. And that's what we're really going for. So we're trying to equip you guys with those tools, and we're really focusing on the collaboration piece. I just talked about that, the why, reminding teachers all the time, because I think this is a big misconception in our field, that a guaranteed and viable curriculum is your state standards. It's not the textbook. It's not teachers pay teachers, even those things are pretty and you can use them. But people should be shaking our hands when we get a job and saying, welcome to education. Your job is to teach these standards. That's the equity piece. in our state. And that's something we're passionate about. The why I did this is I went to so many, and I'm from a town of 500 who got to college and didn't quite know, I had to teach myself a lot. But a lot of schools don't know the standards, or they don't even have resources. And that's creating a real disparity. That's not fair to kids or teachers not to have those things. So we're really trying to make a dent in Missouri education by making sure every kid has educational equity with that, and that they know their standards. So here's an example of the curriculum management tool, right, that you've seen. We're going to do a little looking at this. So one of the things we have you do during the process is to look inside your resources and find where the priority and supporting standards fit. And this is Eureka Math, okay, that somebody has created a pacing guide to that. And I want you to notice, so let's see if we can, people on my team, you should know the answer. But let's see, Brad and Cynthia, as you look at this, do you notice anything that teachers should maybe, that should be pointed out or consider as they've created this? Does anything stand out? Val or Cynthia, or Val or Sue, you can jump into. What do we notice? What would you, if this is what a teacher just created, they said, here's my resource, I looked inside of it, what priorities and supporting, and we're now taking a bird's eye view because we're kind of auditing their resources as we do it. What do we notice about Eureka Math here?
Go ahead, Val.
Well, I notice a lot of stuff. So the priority standards are actually ICANN statements. This is kind of silly, but I noticed that the Missouri Learning Standards and the item specs have lost their link.
Oh, in this, yes. In the ones our clients use, they're linked. This was a pre-linked.
And I would direct teachers to take a look at module 6 because there's no priority standards attached to that. And I'm looking at, can we use those 10 days differently, or could we move module 6 to another module that is a little lighter, maybe module 2? I don't know. I'm just looking at, I hate spending 2 weeks of school, which is really 10 days, on a module that we're not going to test anything unless it's a foundation that's needed for something else. And in that case, I'd want to incorporate it with another module.
Right. And if we look at module 2, look, it's 25 days. And now we're finding there's really only one Missouri priority standard in it. So this is just a reminder, as your teachers are doing this curriculum management tool work and they're kind of vetting their resources, sometimes people like Eureka Math, they're taking that textbook and they're just following it all the way through. And what we'd want them to notice here is, hey, in module 2, there might be some lessons you can skip or go through quicker. You probably don't want to spend 25 days because there's really only one Missouri priority standard that it's really covering. Does this make sense, Cynthia and Brad, of how teachers can kind of reconcile? We're trying to help them. We've been so resource heavy in education. We're trying to help them see where their standards connect, and that you can still use that resource, but we could be better consumers and utilizers of our resource by knowing this information. Because I think some teachers we work with get really stressed of, oh my gosh, I can't teach every lesson in this book. I just can't get through it. Well, it wasn't made to teach every lesson. It's a resource. It's made to teach your standards. So you have to know your standards so you know which lessons to spend time on. So one of the, we try to with, and I think Brad, with your teachers and with admin, you know, we've created this note sheet where we give them this feedback. We might say, hey, look at module 6, consider moving it to module 7. But thoughts from you, Cynthia and Brad, about this idea of looking at your resource and kind of seeing where the standards plug in.
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Brad.
You can go.
I was going to say, that's where we struggle, honestly, at this point in time, is that my teachers, because we're a very small district also, and our teachers are always, we we are around about 5 larger school districts. So we end up losing teachers to those bigger school districts that can offer more money and so forth and retain them easier. So I think when we get those new teachers in, that's where we struggle because they depend so heavily on the textbook to lead them through instead of the standards. And it's like, I give them permission over and over. You don't have to teach every lesson. But even that, though, they still don't understand really what that truly means, I believe at times. But like this school year, I have 5 brand new teachers in the elementary again out of 15-ish, so, it's difficult to go all the way back to square one with them instead of I feel like that's what happens. We get so far and then we have to go all the way back because we don't have anything great like this in place for those teachers.
I think kind of going through this process, we are in the transition that I think a lot of our teachers really looked at their textbook as their curriculum. And we
Mhm.
have to like change that paradigm to say, no, this is a resource, just like teachers pay teachers, just like something you find out on the internet, just like your friend in Fort Osage shares with you. Like the curriculum is driven by the standards. And we really didn't have everyone's curriculum was different. And when I came in, we hired a couple teachers and the new teachers came in and the old teachers had already left. And so we're looking around, well, where's their curriculum? Well, it's really nowhere to be found. And that's a big problem, especially when you're talking about brand new teachers and things like that. So that kind of prompted all this. The other thing I think that we have to, again, have a paradigm shift in is like you said, with unit 2 here, with unit 6, like we really have to get into the mode of prioritization of material into what we have to know, which is the priority standards, what's great to know, and then what we can learn if we have time, or maybe we don't have time. And so that is a large mindset shift for some of our teachers that I think have just opened a textbook, and today we're doing 1.1, tomorrow we're doing 1.2. So this process is helping with that. Again, we have a lot more work to do on that and on just that kind of philosophy, but really forcing our staff to dive into the priority standards and vet what they're doing to make sure we are implementing all these things into our teaching and pacing that out so we make sure we hit all these things throughout the year has been an important process for us.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're so right with paradigm and mindset. And that's the biggest thing is helping people understand that it's really standards. And when you talk about, I think it's so true, the mindset of that we have to prioritize. A lot of people don't understand that these priority standards came in a response to the pandemic when the state brought on the new teacher project and they said, hey, how to respond to the pandemic is to prioritize standards in order to accelerate learning, because you cannot cover and go deeply with every standard. And so Commissioner Van Deven said, well, I'll go ahead and let's get work groups together and just choose priority standards for every school, because we were all kind of doing it on our own. Well, then they said, hey, we'll also change our assessment to those priority standards. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but in the end it is, because we have more clarity than ever before. But Brad, I think you're right. This mindset of we have to I think people kind of know about the priority standards, but they don't know that Desi's really saying the other ones you just have to cover. The priorities are the ones that you really have to go deeply in and that students have to master. And the problem with using these other things, I always joke with teachers, you haven't done it, but you have a friend who's looked over the shoulder of a kid taking the MAP or EOC, and that friend has probably told you, oh, shoot, we taught that concept, but not in that way. I'm like, did your friend say that when they looked over their shoulder? Well, what's happening is those assessments are over your standards, and you're teaching a resource who, does that make sense? It's an alignment problem. And I think that's when it usually clicks for them, of that's why you have a disconnect when you look over the kid's shoulder, because you're not standards focused, you're resource focused. And we're trying to help you take the guessing game to know what that standard is. And now they're prioritized. So all of that is a mindset, which kind of goes to the theme of this call for administrators. How do we put processes in place? I think this is the system, right? We have a system in place that is making really clear in every unit. We're telling you, here's what has to be assessed, and here's what just needs to be covered. But then how do we keep carrying over those conversations and do DeFore's work of collaboration, of what that really means? So we don't have, I was going to make us do this on a Google Doc. We're a small group, so I'm not going to share the link. Let's just talk about, and Cindy, you can just share with what you're currently using. We want teachers to really, when we talk about guaranteed and viable curriculum, think about their standards based. The guarantee is the state standards, and the viability is we have a plan of how to teach them. When you think about that, what part of your guaranteed and viable curriculum is going well, or what things do you think teachers need more collaboration over? So the more collaboration over might be this idea of, yeah, but they still need to know what those priority standards really mean, or we need to go back and really have this conversation of, but what lessons do you really need to know? So if we talk about what's going great with guaranteed and viable curriculum, what would you say in your district you feel is going well?
We have started the conversations, and we have been having the conversations of tearing those priorities apart, and the teams really going through and talking about what truly the standard is saying and meaning. But then that's where it just kind of stops. Like you say, we get good things, we go so far, but we don't put things into practice. So that's where we are. And then it goes back, we have those conversations with teachers about focusing on standards. Standards is your curriculum, But when they go back to the classroom, they're going back to using the textbook, because we haven't fully implemented a viable curriculum, the guaranteed and viable. So yeah, we're still in the beginning stages.
Yeah, but I love that you're saying you're doing that work, you're giving them that think time, because that's part of it. And using some of the grade level is that you're digging into, because you can't get better at something you don't understand. And so the fact that you're giving teachers time to dig into those standards is great. But then I hear you say, but we need more time. And how do we connect that work with their actual textbook?
Right.
Perfect. Brad, what would you say is going well in your district with the things we put in place?
I mean, I think the process has really opened our eyes to knowing our priority standards. I think we've also really started to think a little more standards driven in our curriculum and instruction. I do think we still have some work to do on reinforcing and making sure we don't fall back to simply using the textbook as the curriculum resource. So we did, to help with that, is through the NEE evaluation tool, we changed one of our indicators to really basically the taught curriculum and the written curriculum align. So we're going to be using that as part of our evaluation tool to kind of go with this, to further reinforce the work that we've been doing. So
I love that, because I'm going to give you a protocol today that administrators might be able to use to kind of support teachers with that, the taught versus intended. Perfect. Val and Sue, I'm curious, anything when you think about schools you're working with that you think is going well in general, or any patterns of what you think of goodness or things people need more on? Because we work with lots of different schools.
Well, something that's kind of the immediate in my mind is teachers are actually reaching out and asking for feedback specifically about how they've paced their standards. So that to me is a really good sign that that they care that much and that they're putting in that much effort and want the feedback. Because I mean, so often we work on curriculum and we're kind of on our own little island, and especially in smaller districts, we don't really have anyone to collaborate with. So yeah, I think that's a really good sign that we're making a difference.
And what's fresh in my mind is I was in a school district yesterday and we talked about those barriers that teachers face to having self-efficacy as a building. And it's that clarity that they're missing. And they really felt like the ELA map book that they were using to help with lesson planning and backwards designing was really helping along with the curriculum management tool. So bringing that clarity and helping them remove some of those barriers that seem to get in the way, that give them that sense that, yes, I can do this, I can make a difference.
Awesome. And what about this idea? What do you think most of the schools you work with need more collab and help on?
I think they need more collab with just how do they pace their priority standards and how do they vet their tests against the priority standards to make sure if the test that they're using actually is asking the questions in the way that they're being assessed. And so that sort of collaboration, that meaningful collaboration for teaching teams.
I would agree with that too. And I know that's kind of where we're at, is starting down that assessment vetting process. Because I really think for years, I mean, I think we have pretty good teachers. I don't know that they've been teaching what they need to be teaching. And that's been reflected in our assessment scores over the last several years. So I think that's going to be a really valuable thing as we start to dive into the assessment alignment with the curriculum.
Yeah. Well, and that goes to clarity. And I'm going to share an example. I was in a district. This is when I decided to take this show on the road, right? I had created the map book. I'm using it with a team. And you two don't have any difficult teams, I'm sure, but this was kind of a difficult first grade team. They had some attitude, which is always really fun to coach, and because they know everything already. And they came into the meeting and they said, we've used this test for 10 years. It's great. We don't even need to be here. And I'm like, hi, good to see you too. Great. So normally, and I'd already looked at the test and guess what? It didn't hit the standard. So this is always a real fun thing as an administrator, instructional leader, to have a conversation, because no matter how nice you are, to tell a teacher something they've been doing for 10 years is not right. How well does that go, you two? It doesn't go well at all.
Not good.
Good. Yeah, we're put in those situations a lot, because what happens is when we bring it up, you automatically get to that place of insecurity, right? Of, oh my gosh, they're telling me I don't know what I'm supposed to do, which is our greatest fear. And we can't learn in that way. So I feel like DeFore means well with collaboration, but how we've done it sometimes comes across as a personal attack, right? Of telling somebody, well, this person has great data. Okay, that sounds good in theory, but then everybody just starts hating the person at the table with great data. Rather than wanting to know what they're doing, because people's insecurity. So this is where I think there's a power of having it in a book. So here's what I did. So I'm like, okay, awkward situation. Normally I'd have to coach through it and try to be really kind, but the person still wouldn't learn. Now with a tool, I can say, great. Well, so you're testing text features, and I'm glad you're confident in your test. But what I want you to do is open up your book, or we did it digitally, and double click on that priority standard. And I want you to read the difference between a level 3 question and a level 2 question. Just read those stems on your tool. And when I saw a pencil fly across the table, that's when I realized, oh, okay, there might be some cognitive dissonance going on. And one of the teachers said, well, according to this thing, a 3 means they use text features to find information, and a 2 is just identifying text features. Our whole assessment's just identifying text features. And I'm thinking, And I just kind of let it sit, right? And then another lady who taught there forever said, well, I do a whole 3-week unit on all the names of text features. I thought that's what that standard meant. And then finally, the positive one in the group says, yeah, guys, but I think all we have to do is change a couple of our questions to how could you use this text features to find where mice find their food? But long story short, I'm watching this all unfold, but here's the difference. Nobody's mad at me. A book or a piece of paper revealed that information. And so while their cognitive dissonance didn't make them excited, happy at first, it wasn't personal, if that makes sense. It took the personal out of it, and it was, man, this is what the state documents say. So we were finally able to say, and then it came up the question, well, can we even have any level 2s? And they look to me, and they'll look to your administrators, and the power is to say, what does your team think? You're the experts. That's the shift to get to PLCs, because sometimes teachers want a leader in the group to make the decision. Why? Because when it all falls apart, they have someone to blame. Does that make sense? Like I'm trying to retrain people of, well, what does your team think? Well, we think we should have some level 2s. I would think that's a smart idea, because you could kind of see where they're falling out. But I'm sharing this example with you to just share the power when we get to this assessment part is a piece of paper, and having a tool to do it makes all the difference, because I feel like we can really move them in their learning, because it's not personal anymore. I didn't come here to personally tear your test apart, because that's how I feel like they sometimes felt when we were trying to have collaboration meetings. Now we truly have a tool to help bring us clarity. So what does that mean for us as a team? Thoughts about this notion of, can you see how that would be helpful? Or have you ever been in those situations where it's been hard to coach?
I think the tool's great for that. I mean, again, we haven't gone through the assessment portion, but just in the curricular alignment piece, I mean, we had people with that realization of, oh my God, I've been teaching things that I am spending way too much time on that I shouldn't be, or that aren't even a standard for my grade level, just because they've been doing it for years. And
right.
Quite honestly, we had some tears.
Yes, we did.
That's not a reflection on you guys. That was just a oh my gosh moment for some of these teachers. On the other side, we had so many first and second year teachers say, I didn't know any of this. This was never really taught to me in my college courses. This was not something that had been a focus of workshops or PD. So it was like, oh my gosh, this is great information to have. So I think it was good for everyone. It just hits a little harder if you've been doing it for X amount of years and you're like, this whole why didn't I know this thing? Well, you didn't know because you didn't know, but now you know, and we're going to work to fix it. And that's just been my philosophy on it. Like, we can't change the past, but let's try to do better moving forward. So.
Cynthia, anything else you wanted to add? Okay, well, I think Brady hit a good point. And I'm going to give one more example of just the management tool. I was working with a second-year government teacher who looked like he was 18. This shows how old I'm getting. I'm like, how are you old enough to teach? Because he was really young. But he said, I'm really upset my EOC scores weren't very good. And I'm really upset. Well, first, he didn't know that the priority standards and what the tools of inquiry were, right? So this work was kind of teaching him of, well, assessments are going to be looking different. It's not memorization. They have to know the process of how to think. But then he did this process, and after about an hour, he called me over and he said, come over here. I know why my EOC scores were so low. He said, I just paced all this. He's like, look at where all my standards fall. He's like, a fourth of my standards fall in this unit 2. I spent 3 weeks on unit 2 and I spent months on this other stuff. And he was so excited because he had no idea, and I think that's the part of where we say clarity brings confidence. it was so great to see this guy who was really deflated going in, because you could tell he's a high achiever. And to your point, he's doing the curriculum that was left to him, which said spend 3 weeks over these things. And now that he's done this work, he sees, oh my gosh, that's the real meat of what they have to know. I have to pace that out differently. So I think we have lived in a field where we don't know what we don't know, and we're all doing the best we can. But why? It's just that's why I keep saying this is a systems problem in our field, that we've been doing it for 50 years, just doing what feels right rather than having some more science behind it. So I hope with the management tool and all of that we're helping bring more science and clarity around what teachers should be doing. So a next step for some of you, or as we get things paced, I just wanted to do a quick reminder. If you have extra PD time, once they get those standards paced, also have them try to go back and link resources. So this is just an example of how a social studies teacher has done that, to the point where we talk about systemically, most of us walk in and didn't have a curriculum. Brad, you mentioned some of yours didn't. Not only do we want to have the standards paced, but we want to encourage our people to really make these templates a landing page where everything they're doing, don't let those great quizzes that we vetted go to waste. Make sure they're saved in a shared drive and they're hyperlinked right to this document, because we're really trying to get teachers to go to the same landing page, but it's helping us create that sustainable system. When other people come and go, you still have what you need and it's saved there. All right, so that's really just an idea of a next step for this work too, for your administrators, or if you had more PD time, to keep encouraging them to link everything to these documents. So leader accountability, I kind of put one of our goals is, leadership moves when you have these forms in place, that principals need to be involved in the training and process. And so Brad, your principals were in there, and I think that's so important. And look, see, you stole my bullet. Teacher evaluation follow-up meetings, how you even changed your knee to, I just take a bow, to that intended versus, taught curriculum. Helping, this map book could be helpful going into a classroom. I think we're trying to help train administrators. How do you be in that instructional leader? And this helps them. So if I go into, right now we're doing our 6 through 10 math book. It's talking about polynomials. What the heck is a polynomial, Brad? I don't know. But if I'm a principal and I have this tool and I'm walking into a classroom, the first thing that they should be doing is pulling up that pacing guide. What should I be seeing when I walk in there today? See how much that speaks to teachers. And some of our buildings who are really doing it well, they say during they do a monthly meeting. I'm kind of stealing this idea from one of our clients. She said, I always start off with, well, tell me what unit, I'm looking at your pacing guide. Where are you in it right now? But what that does to that teacher of, oh my gosh, you look at that? Mm-hmm. Right. That's a simple thing that we need to be doing. Like, hey, where are you at? I was noticing that your ICANN wasn't written on the board. It's right there in that pacing guide. Can you make sure to put your ICANN on there? Student clarity. But I feel like we're trying to take some of the heavy lifting. It's written right there for you. So let's make sure to have the ICANN. And then asking, if there's, I think an administrator could be using this if they're looking at polynomials and I don't know what it is. I could still flip to that standard and see, well, what kinds of things should I be seeing, right? What types of questions? And that now helps equip me as an instructional leader to have a conversation around, well, as you look at this tool, tell me, were you teaching some level 2s or level 3s here? Because that might be too hard for me, but it kind of leads the conversation, and I'm just using the tools with the teachers to guide them in executing the tools that you have. Because our biggest fear, again, is we don't want these to go by the wayside. So thoughts about, I know you've updated your knee, but how do you feel about helping your administrators have some of these conversations?
No, I mean, I would agree with that. I think one thing that, and I feel like we've done a pretty good job with it, but I think one thing that continually falls through the cracks with the teacher evaluation is the feedback component and making sure you're having those follow-up meetings to review what you saw, have that collaborative conversation. And I love, and this is something I always try to do too, but I love just like letting the teacher tell the story, posing
Yeah.
some open-ended questions where they can really start the conversation. And then most of the time, not always, most of the time, they will come to the answer that they need with some steering from the administrator. Now, every
Yeah.
once in a while, you get these people that think they just walk on water and they don't make any mistakes. But that in my experience is very few and far between. And so
Sure.
using those approaches, using the tools, asking the questions, like you said in the last segment of, okay, well, look at this rubric, show me where you would land on this. And just getting that conversation started, I think is a really valuable growth tool for our teachers.
Balsu, do you guys have any thoughts about thinking about some of your clients and helping them support using these tools through teacher evaluation? Sue, especially right off your evaluation call.
Yeah, I wish I'd thought to mention at the end of the call for our current clients that I definitely would be using the map book as it aligns to whatever growth plan that they chose, especially if they chose, curriculum implementation or differentiation or any of those that are geared towards instruction, and have them bring that map book to our feedback, point it out, talk to them about it, look at the differentiation that's provided in the level 2 and the chunking, and how can we use that when we're reteaching. It applies directly to the growth plan model, especially if that's what they've chosen. It helps them, gather that evidence that they need to prove that they're moving on the continuum. And what a great tool for teachers to have. And what a great landing piece for administrators. We can use that together. Lots of times you pick a goal and then you got to search for all your, what am I going to use to help teachers? And the map book in and of itself is going to help the teacher and the principal have that conversation.
But they need that guidance, I think, and sometimes of how to use it. And that's why, Brad, your teachers have it rather than the book. You could say, let's pull up that digital, double click on it. But again, we're trying to get to this idea of your administrators really need to know how that works in the greater system. Teachers always see everything as a big disconnect. So we do that pace and guide thing over here in the mat tool when I do this. But I think bringing it into teacher evaluation and showing them how it connects with your evaluation process and with your teaching. And now I'm helping coach you. Well, if kids are struggling, let's pull that out. It's going to give you some ideas under the level 2. It helps bring those connections together. That was the biggest thing I found as an administrator is they didn't always see the connections that I saw with everything. So I had to be really intentional showing them of how that does work. They always feel like something else is being done to them, right? So I had to really make those connections. So it's now become the Brad show, us versus Brad. So I'll get ready to wrap it up, but Brad, I hope this was a little bit helpful, and I wonder if next time it might be something, we'll record it. So if it's something you wanted to share with your administrators, but I think we're still trying to get the word out what these client collaboration calls mean and how we're trying to help get your building leaders on it so we can have discussions with them about, well, what would work for you or what have you tried? So what do you think about this concept of trying to do it globally with a lot of clients? If we can get people to attend, I think it'd be very powerful to hear all the different ways.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, honestly, like a lot of the things we're discussing today apply a little more directly to my building level principals than myself. Like,
exactly. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean but this is great. I think it'd be great for them to hear these things. I think, the more people that we can get to, sign up for these, the more enriching the collaboration would be.
Yes.
Because you're hearing stories from people who are experiencing similar things or have different ideas or in a different setting. So I just think it's a valuable tool. So I'll touch base with my administrators and try to get them signed up and looking at some of the upcoming Zoom sessions and see if they can carve out some time for that.
Well, and I kind of dropped the ball with our client collabs because in the past I've been really good about reminding people and even sending them calendar invites. So I think at our next one, I'll step up my game and we'll have a lot more people on the call. But I think I've just been running with the chicken with my head cut off. But we're trying to kind of, I think there's a learning that comes by through what we're trying to do here because it's unique. Right, that a lot of people they don't really understand what the call is, but I think once we can get them on there, it's just the stuff that needs to be happening, and we can go to conferences, but we don't always get a chance to collaborate. So we'll have the current collaborations, and then you'll see this is just a reminder of what's coming up. You already signed up. Look, your picture comes up.
Look, I'm
top
right
of
there.
Sue has looked at that map data that came out, and we're just going to kind of go through as a state and talk to you about things that we're noticing and make some more connections with our work and give ideas of how we can support that. And then we have that training. That's what I wanted to send to Bramer, that we're doing this camp pedagogy with the books in Chillicothe, which is kind of close to them. But yeah, so keep a lookout. We're going to keep trying to build a lot more content on this network for your district to use. Again, trying to help you always have great things to use with people. Career ladder, I think it would be good, that they could go on there, and we're going to have science videos. Go watch your science content videos and earn some career ladder. But we're trying to make them really high quality and helpful for people. So thanks for being a supporter, Brad. You're the best.
I do what I can.
Well, have a great rest of the day.
All right. See you guys. See you next week.
Bye.